So yeah, despite me saying that I wasn't going to be reviewing any more Castlevania games for the time being, I forgot that Halloween had been coming up, and here I am with my incredibly late video. So when we last talked about Castlevania, we covered Bloodlines and Dracula X. By now the series is going to bump up to another generation of consoles with Castlevania Symphony of the Night for the PlayStation and Sega Saturn.
Now, even though Symphony of the Night didn't sell as many copies as Konami had hoped for, as many of you know, it produced an extremely large cult following and was praised beyond belief. When it comes to what the best Castlevania game is, if people didn't immediately think Super Castlevania 4, they most likely thought Symphony of the Night. In fact, this is probably the most liked Castlevania game of all time, and became one of the definitive games to own for the PlayStation, along with other classics like Tomb Raider, Final Fantasy VII, Crash Bandicoot, or Metal Gear Solid.
Damn, that's quite a ballsy statement right there. But you know, future console generations can do that in some franchises. I mean, look at the likes of Super Metroid, or Ocarina of Time, or Mario 64. All revolutionary games within the same decade. And here we have another one to go in that staying pile. This is my review of Castlevania Symphony of the Night.
Before we do though, let's take a quick look at the Famicom version of Castlevania 3 Dracula's Curse. The gameplay is pretty much the same except for a few tweaks that I think benefit the overall experience. Firstly, the enemies later down the road don't do quite as much damage as they did in the NES version, so the game's not quite as hard as it was before. It's still pretty freaking difficult, but you should have a slightly easier time than before. Grant's default weapon is no longer that dinky knife he had in the NES version, but rather a simple throwing dagger, which still does little damage, but definitely covers more range. That's nice, but I think I'm gonna stick with Sypha, who still kicks ass by the way. Yeah, f*** you Death, f*** you Doppelganger, f*** you Dracula. Something I forgot to mention about the NES version in my review was the famous Help Me code, which many players have used to give them 10 lives for each continue instead of the usual 3. Why did I forget to talk about something as important as that? Well, I didn't use the Help Me code in my Castlevania 3 review, because I'm a badass like that. Don't believe me? Watch my review. The Famicom version, however, gets rid of this code, so good luck to you. Trevor is also known as Ralph over in Japan for some bizarre reason, and they spell his last name wrong, Belmond. Well, at least that's a step up from Belmondo, that's for sure. Still though, Ralph? Could there be a less intimidating name than that? Oh wait, yes, Gabriel Belmont. Hey Gabe, gonna be slaying some vampires today, are we? Ooh, wow, you're really beating the hell out of that thing, aren't you, Gabe? Ah, good old Gabe. But the number one reason I think that this is the definitive way to play Castlevania 3 is because of the music. Oh my god, this sounds incredible. The Famicom has more sound channels available than it does on the NES, and man did Konami exploit it. The NES soundtrack was great on its own, but this is just even better. Beginning and Vampire Killer have never sounded so damn good on an 8-bit system, and this version of Flashback is probably the best credits theme I have ever heard. My only one minor complaint with this version though is that unless you speak Japanese, you can't read the ending text or the title. I still have a major problem with the second to last stage as well. This stage can seriously go f*** itself. How does Konami expect you to go through instant death spikes, vertical scrolling sections, pain in the ass birds, and stone pillars to dodge and kill, knockback that leads you to the bottomless pits, and having to fight that doppelganger all in one go? Like in the NES version, I really get sick of this level by the end, so I'm just going to use Sypha and get this over with.
But anyway, that's the Famicom version of Castlevania 3, and with that out of the way, let's finally move on to Symphony of the Night.
Symphony of the Night takes place 4 years after the events of Rondo of Blood. Although you wouldn't know that by looking at the opening stage title, where it references the wrong game. Seriously, how do you do that to your own franchise? But anyway, the opening stage is a recreation of the final battle in Rondo of Blood, where Richter is on the stairway to Dracula. Wow, we're fighting him already? Boy, Dracula's been getting really pathetic since his last encounters. Just use the holy water item crash on both forms and he's toast. Look at that, I didn't take a single hit. What's funny is that the battle is actually almost this easy in Rondo of Blood. So after seriously whooping Dracula's butt, the 4 years have passed and one night a full moon rose and caused Castlevania to materialize again and somebody's wanting to resurrect Dracula. Not only that, but Richter has also disappeared, and since there aren't any other Belmonts left that can slay Dracula, this leaves the rest of the game in the hands of Alucard, making a welcome return from Castlevania 3, and has had quite a hell of a beauty sleep since that game. Forget everything you know about Castlevania games at this point, Symphony of the Night plays completely differently. The linear level structure is gone, there aren't any orbs you need to touch, and you no longer have a whip. The game instead goes for a fully non-linear style, where you explore the whole castle, coming across various traps, obstacles, monsters, and overall themes. On one side you could be investigating a dank rooftop with lots of mist, whereas on another side you could be searching around the frozen waterlands, complete with ferrymen. You're not totally unprepared, however, as you do have a map system to help you keep track of where you're going. The Saturn version has some exclusive areas to look around in, but why is that only for the Saturn version and not for both that and the PlayStation? Alucard has also gotten a lot better at dealing with monsters since his debut in Dracula's Curse. Not only is he able to soar high and finally control his jump in midair, but he also has some RPG elements added to him like the traditional strength, defense, and magic, which can be improved by gaining experience points from killing monsters, eventually leveling you up and increasing your stats. Alucard doesn't use a whip unfortunately, but he is able to locate various weapons throughout the castle, which are mostly swords. You can find the Morningstar around, but it doesn't travel anywhere near as far as it did in the other games. Still though, it's not a bad weapon. You can also find bits of armor that for the most part do absolutely nothing, but there are a few that can actually help. Like the Mirror Cuirass, which makes you resist turning into stone, and the Spike Breaker, which, well, does just that, break spikes. That's also the same with the cloaks. In fact, I think there are only 2 in the game that actually do something, and even then they're not terribly useful. The accessories definitely give you the best advantage in terms of clothing. There's one that will give you a boost in defense, improve your strength by a crap load, lets poison or fire heal you, increases the MP restoration rate, the list goes on. The only accessories that don't provide any use whatsoever are the mineral rings. These things are everywhere and their only purpose is to be sold to the librarian, but we'll get back to that in a minute. As mentioned before, one of Alucard's RPG stats includes magic, meaning he can perform various spells, which can either help provide extra offense or other means of healing yourself. It's a trial and error process, however. The manual does inform you that there are spells in the game, but aside from the picture next to it, it doesn't exactly tell you how to execute these spells. I guess it's just a means of experimentation, but still, a hint would have been nice at least. Well, you are able to buy scrolls that teach you a majority of the spells from this game's shop in the library, but again, that's only a majority. After you buy all the scrolls, there are still 3 others you need to perform in order to complete the full list, so you're best off just looking them up anyway. Going back to the shop, like Simon's Quest, you're able to buy items and equipment to make your journey a bit easier. But you're able to find most of these items in hidden areas or the rooms in the castle, so the shop I find is just all around useless. Not to mention that the library is the only place where you can shop, and even when I do find the extra weapons and armor, I end up replacing it with something that comes up shortly after, unless if it's situational. I also never, repeat, never attack with the one-use weapons, because I never know when I may need it and I'm usually okay with just attacking with my sword anyway. This is mainly why I rarely, if ever, go to the shop at all. There's only one time in the whole game where it's necessary, because you need to buy an item that will give you access to blue doors, and just for the hell of it, a somewhat full map to show you any areas you haven't discovered yet. Dracula's castle is huge. No longer do we get any of that spooky scenery from the other games like the forest or the caverns. The whole of Symphony of the Night takes place inside Castlevania. Why does Dracula need such a big place to live in? How does he get around so easily? I don't know, maybe it's from these teleporters you can find, which transports you to areas you've already been to. But as well as finding weapons, located in certain rooms are relics. These are essentially your power-ups. They start off doing simple things like showing how much damage you do to the enemy, and as mentioned before, being able to open blue doors. But as the game goes on, you'll obtain ones that enable a double jump, give you protection underwater, or even let you have a little buddy that you can level up and help you fight. The fairy familiar can be pretty useful for healing you in tough situations, and can also bring you back to life after you die. But unfortunately, this is only if you already have healing items in your inventory, so the fairy is really only a means of saving you time to go through the inventory menus. The demon is supposed to be firing a bunch of fire, ice, and lightning attacks, but even though I've used him throughout most of my playthrough, not once did he perform these attacks. Do I need to level him up more? If so, how much? Because it sure is taking a long ass time to do. The only other real purpose for the demon is to press this one button in the catacombs, which does lead you to a pretty nifty accessory, so at least there's that. The ghost is pretty much the same thing, except he rarely even attacks, and the bat does so little damage you might as well not even have him out in the first place. The sword, however, is awesome. It homes in on enemies and slashes the hell out of them. That's all that needs to be said. Aside from when you level it up to 99, it'll become a separate weapon for you to use. I can't remember if it's supposed to be the strongest sword of the game, but it's meant to be pretty damn powerful. My only issue with it is that it's in a pretty cryptic spot on a ceiling you wouldn't even think of destroying. Yeah, that was totally obvious. In fact, there are quite a few places like that, and it pisses me off every time I see them. But you guys already know how much I loathe cryptic moments, so let's move on. There are also a few transformation relics you can get, which allows Alucard to turn into either a wolf, mist, or of course, a bat. Honestly though, you're only going to be using the Bat Relic, as it either lets you reach places you couldn't before, or you can totally bypass any difficult sections you don't feel like doing. What's more is that unlike Castlevania 3, you don't lose 1 heart per second as long as you're a bat, effectively removing all challenge this game had to offer. The Mist form I don't use at all aside from moving across these vents, despite being able to get an upgrade that lets you attack in that form, and the Wolf form is such a weak attack. In addition, until you get the power of the Wolf Relic to quickly get around the castle, you're going to be mashing the hell out of the backdash button to get to places slightly faster than by walking. And man, does this look goofy.
So, wait a minute. Let me get this straight. A non-linear side-scrolling game with a map system, large environments, monsters to kill, power-ups to collect, and a bit of backtracking to use your newly found abilities? There's another video game franchise similar to that, Metroid!
Yeah, Symphony of the Night was inspired by the Metroid series, particularly Super because that was one of the hottest games on the SNES. I mean look, you've got the power-ups, map system, non-linear gameplay with some backtracking, it's all there. I wonder what motivated them to go for this style. But regardless, it all works well with this game. Each item you collect feels very rewarding, and there's always something new at every corner that you need to watch out for. Hence why most Castlevania fans refer to this and other games with a similar style as Metroidvania.
What genius came up with that idea?
You know what, I've completely forgot to mention what happens in the beginning of the game. Alucard starts off with some of the best equipment in the game and absolutely destroys anything with one hit, big or small. But that's only until you meet Death, who takes all your stuff away. Now Alucard is only left with his dinky little fist until he finds another sword. Yeah, come on, put him up, ow! I'm really not a fan of the whole starting off with the best gear and losing it minutes after thing, because not only does it tease the players and it's just an overall waste of time, it just makes the game too easy to play up until that point, and as a result, it can get pretty boring. But if there's one thing Symphony of the Night does not take from Metroid, it's voice acting.
Die, monster! You don't belong in this world!
That's Richter's voice, huh?
Yes, this was the first Castlevania game to use voiceover work, and very much like Resident Evil, this game is notorious for it being mind-numbingly cheesy with some pretty goofy dialogue.
A miserable little pile of secrets! But enough talk! How about you?
Magnificent! But now feel my unbridled wrath.
Alucard, what is your business here?
Wait! I beg of you!
Oh, sweet Jesus, I can't decide which game is the messier acting. Richter sounds like he's doing a bad impersonation of Christopher Walken, Dracula overacts beyond belief, and Death sounds like he smoked one too many cigarettes. Even someone as minor as the succubus sounds like she's trying to channel her inner Tommy Wiseau.
Darkling, I smell your blood. You're a vampire?
Well, this does reveal another plot point where we see that Alucard's mother and Dracula's wife Lisa was executed because she was claimed to be a witch, which I actually find kinda sad when I think about it, although the acting certainly doesn't help. Then the feeling doesn't last long when it turns out that the succubus was only playing Alucard. Speaking of the succubus, I guess I should talk about the boss fights. Like in Metroid, you'll come across certain rooms that contain bosses. Some of them are optional, but they're the best way to level you up and improve your stats. However, unlike the other Castlevania games, these bosses are absolutely no problem. Because you're upgraded with so much stuff and have a lot of items handy, there should rarely be a case of you actually dying to one of them. Which brings me to my final point. Because of the many options of dealing with combat available to you, Symphony of the Night is a rather easy game. You heard me right, there's a Castlevania game that's easy. Okay, there may be a few moments that first-timers may struggle with, but the bottom line is that even though the game is easy, it doesn't decrease in the fun factor, and that's all you need in the game, to have fun. So when you first get to the room with the giant clock, Alucard comes across Maria, now 17 years old and is searching around the castle for Richter, with Alucard making sure to give her a heads up if he runs into him. Later, when he enters the Colosseum, how did Dracula fit a Colosseum in here? He actually does find Richter, who says that he is the ruler of the castle. Giving Maria the bad news, she doesn't think she can take it and runs away from Alucard. So on her way to make Richter snap out of it, we get to... Okay, what is this series fetish for clock towers? Why has that become a common thing for Castlevania games? I mean, they're cool, but geez, think of something different. But anyway, the clock tower is definitely the hardest section of the game, mainly because of the overabundance of yellow Medusa heads that freeze you if you touch them. As if they weren't annoying enough. But I definitely wouldn't say it's that big of an area. Not too long after going through the tower, we come across the stairway to Dracula from the beginning of the game, but instead, it's Richter that's waiting for us this time. Like the other bosses, he's not too challenging, although I swear to God his Hydro Storm attack is impossible to avoid. But I guarantee you'll probably die at least once to him. So after we actually get to kill a Belmont, Alucard stands outside of the castle with Maria, apologizing for having to take down Richter by force. Maria decides to carry on figuring out what caused Richter to turn evil, while Alucard leaves the area.
I've always been drifting high up in the sky that never...
Okay, that's only the bad ending. Getting the good ending requires you to obtain the gold ring by defeating the succubus, and the silver ring in this area in the chapel that's filled with spikes. Putting the two together spells out that you need to wear them in the clock tower, and in doing so, we see that, wait, this is the clock tower? Then what's all this about? It even says clock tower when you first enter the area. Anyway, using the rings of this giant clock will reveal a hidden passageway where you find Maria again, who now believes that Richter may have gone to the bad side. She then gives Alucard glasses that are meant to see beyond evil illusions. What's pretty cool is that in the Saturn version you can actually fight Maria before getting the glasses. Taking these glasses back to the Richter fight, we can now see a floating sphere that, if he managed to break, reveals that he was being controlled by a dark priest named Shaft. Shaft? Really? Konami didn't expect anybody to snigger at that name?
Hey, as long as he's not a sex machine to all the chicks, I'm good.
But anyway, Shaft disappears and Richter returns to normal. However, shortly after, there's another castle that emerges above the one we're in, and it's upside down. By the way, these CGI cutscenes are incredibly ugly to look at, even for PlayStation standards. Leaving no second thought, Alucard goes in to follow Shaft and stop him from resurrecting Dear Daddy. And here's where the game starts falling apart. This second castle is the exact same one we've already been traveling through, except now it's upside down. Ooh, that totally deserves replaying again. There are also much tougher enemies to fight this time around, and even more boss fights to encounter. Although like last time, a majority of them are optional. In fact, only 5 of the bosses are necessary to beat the game, all of which were bosses you fought in the very first Castlevania. I do gotta say though, it is really cool that one of the optional bosses are fake versions of the cast from Castlevania 3. I was amazed when I first saw this, and still am every time I come back to it. This is just awesome. You'll also get a chance to punish Death for putting you through all that shit since the beginning of the game, and my god is he an absolute pushover. Even with 2 forms, he's pretty damn pathetic. Like in Simon's Quest, after you defeated each of the required bosses, you receive one of Dracula's body pieces to... well, I don't know actually, why am I collecting pieces of Dracula? Is it to keep it away from Shaft? Does Alucard have a hobby of collecting body parts? I'm a bit curious. The point is though, is that the second half of the game has always felt like a drag to me. I really hate the idea of having to spend hours traveling through Dracula's stupidly big castle, only to having to do it again, upside down. It's a really dumb idea and it just feels like an unnecessary way to pad out the game. I mean, granted, when you first start out you'll probably get your ass handed to you, but like the first castle, it gets much easier after you've leveled up in one area. Almost as if this castle only served as one big annoying obstacle. Even when you get to some of the hardest boss fights in the game, there's always an easier way to kill them. So this all just feels like filler until you get the Shaft. Speak of the devil, after obtaining all of Dracula's pieces and returning to the giant clock, we can finally confront against Shaft and stop him from resurrecting the Lord of Darkness himself. He also reveals that his plan was to intentionally make Richter the Lord of the Castle so that other Belmonts can try and fight him and thus hopefully cause the extinction of the Belmont clan, since the Vampire Hunter's powers are so great. If you have the 2 accessories that either get you healed through fire or lightning, then Shaft will take seconds to beat. However, despite defeating Shaft, Dracula is resurrected anyway, hamminess and everything. Now, even though getting through the inverted castle is a complete chore, the final battle against Dracula is actually pretty damn intense. I wouldn't say he's totally hard, but he's definitely the toughest of all the boss fights. And Jesus is he big. I don't think I've ever seen Dracula this gargantuan before. But anyway, if you've been exploring everywhere in the castles and have been upgrading your health, you should be fine. If not, then you can always use the fairy relic to help you. With Dracula beaten once more, he wonders what Lisa's last words were, and Alucard informs him that she will always love him and that he shouldn't harm human beings. Dracula begs for her forgiveness and then fades away, ending Symphony in the Night.
Ah, see, Dracula's not such a bad guy. I'm sure that he won't appear in any future Castlevania game, so we can finally go up against a new threat and have a lot more adventures with the Belmont family. He's still going to be the bad guy, isn't he?
Anyway, Alucard exits the castle and meets up with Richter and Maria, telling them that it may be best for him to disappear and not meet them ever again. Why? I thought we were all pretty good friends at this point. Is it because Alucard's a vampire? Well, if Edward Cullen can somehow get away with living in the real world, I'm sure Alucard can too. Actually, if you manage to explore almost the entire castle, there's another ending where Maria goes after Alucard to help him out with... something. Afterwards we get the credits, which has a pretty nice song I might add. The last thing to mention is that if you beat the game, you have the option of playing as Richter instead of Alucard. And Christ does he pack a punch. Richter is f***ing ridiculous. Not only are you able to use the whip again, but he has a much stronger attack and has some new acrobatic abilities that can hurt enemies if positioned right. He can slide on the floor, do a Shoryuken, and even has that twirling attack that Simon had in Super Castlevania 4. The only issues I have with Richter is that you can't level him up or give him any other weapons or accessories, and the backflip is now practically useless, since it doesn't travel that far at all. You also won't be able to upgrade his health or number of hearts, which means if you're not careful as to where you tread, you're going to get your ass kicked. Overall though, I'm personally not a fan of playing as Richter. Because of his overpowered abilities, there's absolutely no skill involved, and if you don't explore everywhere in the castles, you can beat his playthrough in less than 45 minutes. It's also really disappointing that he doesn't fight Dracula at the end. Instead it's just Shaft, and then Richter stands outside the castle afterwards.
So, what happened? Did I stop Dracula from being resurrected? Is Shaft really dead? Is he taking possession of Richter off screen? I don't understand.
But anyway, that's Castlevania Symphony of the Night for you. Do I think it's the greatest game of the series? I'm sorry, but I'm gonna have to say no on that one. Don't get me wrong, this is a great game to play, but like I said before, my biggest issue is the inverted castle. Sure, it doesn't take you as long to get through because of your upgraded abilities, but it's a really stupid idea to come up with for means of making the game longer. Graphically, I will say that it looks very nice. It has a really good mix of good old-fashioned 2D sprites and 3D objects to make for one overall gorgeous-looking game for the PS1. Musically speaking though, it's nowhere near as good as other games in my honest opinion. There are some stuff I do get a kick out of, like the Festival of Servants that plays at the boss fights, the Requiem for the Gods that plays in the chapel, and the credits theme known as I Am the Wind is pretty nice to listen to as well. But the other songs I either just find dull or uninspired. There's one particular tune that I really like that plays in the first few rooms of Dracula's castle. But this area is the least likely you'll be coming back to after you've cleared it, so you won't be hearing this incredible song for very long. Now I know sound isn't everything, but this is Castlevania we're talking about. A series that has some of the most memorable tunes in video game history. Hell, you only get to hear Bloody Tears once in the Saturn version, and Vampire Killer is only present in the Xbox Live Arcade version, halfway through the credits. But despite the lack of pizzazz from the music, like Metroid, it takes a certain mind to enjoy a game like this anyway. Symphony of the Night is more for the patient and curious players, while the more linear games are something I think that everybody can enjoy. Nowadays, the console Castlevania games try out different styles of gameplay, while the handheld games continue to follow Symphony of the Night. Never again was there a simple point A to point B side-scroller style Castlevania game, aside from the ones on Game Boy and Castlevania The Adventure Rebirth for the WiiWare. This shows how much of an impression Symphony of the Night made to gamers, and while I personally choose Super Castlevania 4 over this, that's only by an inch because Symphony of the Night is still a fun game to play. With that said, I'll give it an 8.5 out of 10, standing for the love child of Metroid and Castlevania. If you want something more complex than the other games in the series, this is for you, and you should definitely add it in your PS1 collection.
So I promise I won't be going through any more Castlevania games for the time being. But when we do, the next ones we're going to be looking at are the Game Boy games, known as Castlevania The Adventure, Adventure 2, and Legends. My name's Josh Smith, I praise the treasure, and I pick apart the trash. See you guys next time for Mega Man's 1 to 6 on the NES. By the way, yes, I've noticed that my location has changed. University life, baby! Look at these awesome posters, although White Tack is probably the worst thing to keep them up. Damn it.